former captain in the Danish military, recon, founder of an international people performance consultancy, leadership expert, and now author, Torben Noerby. Thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me, Paul. It's an honor. Thank you.
Now, we've got to get this right, okay? I was showing off my Danish before we were chatting. Noerby.
That's spot on.
That's spot on. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm trying to get my wife to watch Matador, but it's really difficult to find a series with subtitles in English, right?
Yeah.
Absolute class program. Matador, for those of you who are not into Danish subculture, is a 1970s, 1980 costume drama series that really gets into under the skin of what it means to be a traditional Dane.
Absolutely. It really captures the essence of the Danish culture in the early 1930s and onwards.
There you go. Anyway, back on topic. I made a very brief introduction to you there. Your life didn't start or end as a recon sergeant in the Danish military. Tell us a little bit more.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So, absolutely right. I spent the first 10 years of my career in the army. Then I left for corporate life. I worked with change and business transformation, and first a retail organization, and then globally in a company that does heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. That led to leaving the corporate world and founding a consultancy, People and Performance. And having worked with developing leadership teams and organizations some 8-9 years, I decided to get a bit more background. And that led to doing doctoral studies out of Henley Business School in the United Kingdom, along with still running the consultancy. And I finalized that in 21. And as you said, now author. It took me a couple of years to write down what I actually learned from the global studies. So that's where we're at right now. I'm still the CEO of People and Performance, and I'm enjoying it greatly, working with organizations and management teams and so on.
So you wrote a book called The Contextual Leader, right? So leadership in context, like that. No, turn around so we can all see it. I'll take a picture. There we go. That's us. The Contextual Leader, magnificent. Available in all good bookshops. And I have to say that leadership in context is leadership or bust, right? You can't come in as, I don't know, the white knight salvation type to a regular running business. You can't treat a regularly running business as if it's something you needed to do a turnaround in. You can't treat a turnaround the same way that you would treat a startup, high growth.
Absolutely.
What is leadership in situation, leadership in context? What's the difference? What are you talking about, the difference?
So you can say that the context has a significant influence on performance and engagement in the organization and on which leadership practices are actually effective. And then the situation shifts from day to day, from person to person, from week to week. So that fluctuates at a shorter horizon, the situational leadership approach. And all of that is embedded in a context that sustains a path dependence in the organization. So it kind of sustains a way of operating. And that means that I need to, as a leader, to look at the context, because that shapes the force field that sends my organization, my people, my teams in a certain direction. So if I want different performance because I'm changing strategy, on doing a merger, I need to start looking at the context and say, but I want more initiative, or I want more diligence so we get higher quality, or I want faster response in my organization. And then I need to start working with the organization, their behavior, the processes, how formalized are they, so that I start scaffolding the performance that I want. So the difference between situation and context is context sustains performance and it encompasses all of it. Situation fluctuates. It changes from person to person, situation to situation. Yeah. Okay.
So I think what you're coming to is a framework or a set of guardrails, perhaps, that would define a leader's, how a leader approaches a set of problems. So diagnoses, You come in with a set of tools to a job.
Yep.
You know, and you if you've only got hammers and everything, nails, all those things, but you come in with a set of tools. So you come in with the idea of contextual leadership. It lets you look then at your problems before you start trying to fix them, which is, I think, number one problem. You know, like try and assess whatever it is you're about to fix before you try and fix it. Otherwise, you take your hammer and you start beating around things, and you realize that it's all made of glass. Oops, too late.
Yep.
Set of tools, comes in, look at something, assess the context, and the context changes differently than the situation. I'm sorry, I'm still not completely clear.
That's okay. So let me give you an example.
It's me, I'm not.
Yeah. So let me give you an example. So the context. If I'm in an environment where, let's say, I'm in the wind industry, so I'm producing wind turbines, doing that as projects, producing the whole machine and establishing those either onshore or offshore. That means that I'm operating in a very complex external environment. There's a lot of legislation, there's a lot of different geographies, there's a lot of different ways of financing this kind of project. So that complexity, I need to convert into an internal way of organizing so that I can respond to that complexity. So I need the coordination between legal, production, supply chain, the way we develop projects, all of that I need to reflect. So I got a requisite response to the external complexity. Else I can't perform. So this is the contextual setting. Then we go into a team, and what we're doing right now is something that's totally new for the team. Then I might, as a leader, need to be more directing. So that means that I'm more kind of the framing, what are we going to do? In which order are we going to do it? And then as we build the competence in the team, I can start sharing that leadership. I can empower the team and they can start taking their own decisions. So the latter is the situational part of it. The former, the complexity, the way I set the organization up, that's the contextual part of it. So contextual leadership ranges from defining the structure, setting up, do we have a matrix organization? Well, how do we build the interdependency in the organization? Who needs to coordinate with who? How do we formalize processes? Do we need to describe them a lot or a little? Do we need to centralize decisions or decentralize them? And within that context, I variate my leadership depending on what's the situation at hand, what's the task at hand, what are the people competencies at hand. So there are two ends of the same task. But when I influence context, that sets guardrails is a good way of looking at it. So if I set the guardrails like this, so I give them a mandate to make the decisions, then I need to build a culture of initiative to work with that so that I get empowered action in the front line. And then that's not situational. That's building that up to a level where that's the way the organization performs. And then the situation can fluctuate and shift and all that stuff. But now I've created the guardrails and the carrying wave of empowered action in the front line.
Okay. So this, I think it comes down to alignment then, doesn't it? You're aligning your leadership style to the team, to the organization, the organizational context.
Correct.
And you're matching your leadership to the organizational context.
Correct.
Can you give us a concrete example? Give us something you've done that would actually say, this is what happened, this is the lessons you can take away from it.
So I can give you, so we have in contextual leadership, we've got those two disciplines, matching the context to lead effectively, and then shaping the context to set the organization up for performance. So I worked with a company that was a producer of simple furniture. You know, the things that you buy in IKEA, somewhere like that, and then you put it together yourself, and that's not always working really well, but ready to assemble furniture. So the leader that I helped and the executive team I helped took over a furniture company that was in dire circumstances. They were not earning money, and they were actually very, very close to collapse, and that meant that they needed to do a turnaround. So they looked at the external complexity. The external complexity has grown over the years because the sales force had introduced more and more variations, and they had entered more rooms. So not only the living room, but also the bathroom and the kitchen, and started producing furniture for that. And the way that the sales force were interacting with the customer was that they introduced more and more variations. That meant that complexity ended up in the production. in the supply chain, in all the administration, in all the pricing. And that made it very cumbersome, very slow. So what Tor did, that was the leader of the, he needed help to decipher what are the real value drivers and how do I simplify this complexity so we can align and formalize the processes, reduce the variation, get the quality up, because when you've got a lot of complexity, you do a lot of mistakes. So what he did was that he deselected 2 rooms, out of the bathrooms, out of the kitchens, only living room. That removed a lot of legislation on security for kids and all that stuff. It removed a lot of variation. That allowed him to streamline the supply chain, the production lines into the organization. That required that we re-educated the sales force. That required that we changed, formalized the contracts more, because we were changing from an outside in to an inside out perspective. And this is shaping the context. Now, in order to lead this, the leaders throughout the organization needed to move from a very opening leadership style. They allowed all the variation. They took up new ideas. They invited customers into brainstorming sessions, and towards a more closing leadership approach, trying to remove variation, focus on the value drivers, motivate people to repeat. So we got systematic, repeated, continuous learning, so that we ramped up the efficiency, ramped up the quality. And you need to move that motivation up with that, because they of course thought that they were losing that variation and that customer intimacy. Mm-hmm. That turnaround took about a year, and he went from really red numbers to a solid bottom line. And all of that was because he reshaped the context to match the strategy. And then he adapted the right leadership style to drive that behavior, motivate that behavior, involve people so they started taking over, continuous learning so they became a culture, discipline, so that if we've written it down this way, that was also what we did. Empowerment, so they took action when they saw deviations. So these 3 cultural components, that's the reason that it's interesting to work with subcultures. So try to identify the 3 subcultures. There's a set of 12 components in a culture. Those 3, these were the performance drivers. So this is what contextual leadership is all about. Look at the environment, look at the intentions of the organization. Then you use the word align. Then try to make those ducks come in a row, so it pushes directly on the value creation that you want. And mobilize the people, motivate them, make them own that, so you build it into the culture. And that's the way you do that. And there are multiple examples, because all senior leaders have this task of organizational alignment every time they do a reprioritization of their strategy, every time they want to ramp up efficiency or do a cost out or raise quality or go into a new market. Then they need to look at strategy and then align the organizational context to deliver on that strategy.
Okay, so you're talking about making something out of these subcultures. Rather than dealing with them, you're looking at them as an opportunity driver. You're looking at them as opportunities, rather than things you have to squash or challenges you have to deal with.
Yep.
How do you then identify them? How do you pick? Because you said there's 12. You get 12 subcultural elements. And to discover them all, read the latest edition of the book, available in bookstores near you. But give us a handful, or give us the idea of what they are. How do we say, aha, look at that, that's one over there, I can make money out of that.
Yep. So first of all, it's a very relevant question, and almost all senior leaders have found themselves in the situation where we discuss culture. So we need to operationalize that. So the first thing we do is that we look at the operating model and we look at the strategy. Then we find out, what are we driving? Are we driving efficiency and stability, or are we driving innovation and change? And that's not either or, but that's a mix. And in which parts of the organization are we driving efficiency and stability? And in which parts are we driving innovation and change? Then there is a relation. So if it is innovation, I of course need to say what kind of behavior drives that. So that's ideation, opening discussions, critical thinking, confronting the way we are doing things, reinventing, experimenting. And that means that I need to build a strong innovation culture. And some of the components in an innovation culture that are fleshed out in the book based on the global leadership context study, these are addressable as behavior. That means you involve the team and say, we want more of this desired behavior. We've got a principle that we want to reinvent ourselves to stay at the forefront of this service or this product. So if we are converting that principle into do more and do less, what would that be? We involve the people, we pull that out, and then we write that down. And then we start working on it. How do we get more of that? So we act our way into a stronger innovation culture. Now, that innovation culture, that's related directly to a set of performance behaviors. So we know that we want people that are able to do critical thinking, that experiment. And then I need to look at the processes. So traditionally, when we want to do an investment, we do a business case. We try to calculate return on investment. Now that's thinking coming from efficiency and stability. If I want innovation, I should do a learning case instead. So we'll do this investment in order to learn this and arrive at this stage so we can make a decision on, does this go into pilot or not? So we can't calculate the exact ROI, but what we can do is that we can say, this is the investment box that we set aside for it. So if you use this thinking, efficiency and stability thinking, if we want to drive innovation, we'll kill innovation. If we introduce too many variations, innovation, into efficiency and stability, we'll kill that. Example, now in a manufacturing site, you need to separate the product development and product innovation from the running line. If you do all of that into the running line, you'll introduce too much variation, and that means you lose value. So you separate those, you mature this enough, the new products, until they are piloted. That means that if you don't separate that and understand, over here, my leadership behavior is opening behavior, innovation, ideation. Over here, my leadership behavior is continuous improvement, diligence, quality, discipline. So this is the recognition. And most leaders are well aware that if you lead a manufacturing line the same way you lead a hunting service or a hunting sales force, then you won't have any success either. You need to adapt to that, right? So the whole notion behind contextual leadership is to give you a map, look at that map, reflect on what are the key performance drivers that we need to work on, and then choose those 2 or 3 so you can offer the organization and the leaders simplicity. But at the senior level, if you do not first look at the complexity, there is a risk that you repeat ways of working you've seen work in one context and you translate that or transfer that to another context where it's not apt, where it doesn't work. And we see that with senior leaders changing jobs from one industry to another. If they do not first try to find out what are the key performance drivers in the organization I'm getting into, they might be repeating patterns that were really fit for purpose over here. They repeat them in the new context, and then they actually confront some of the value drivers. Yeah?
I think I see that when you're interviewing senior leaders for roles, and you check into their playbooks. You know, what have you done? When I talk to your last boss, will they say that this is what you've done?
Yeah.
What have you done? How did you do it? How would you do it? Right? Because you don't. This is the context I'm giving you. The problems that I have in front of me here. So I'm in the board of a couple of companies, and you say, look, yes, these are the problems we've identified. What would you do to fix it? I'm not asking for free consulting. I'm just saying, give me your playbook. And if the playbook is industry relevant, or if it's situational relevant, because my understanding is situational, but getting the context now, the situational relevant, and they're trying to translate one to the other, that's valuable, right? But it's not game changing. What I think is game changing is if their playbook is a set of tools that allows them to first analyze, and they talk about, I know how to do a number of things, but I don't know what to do, right? I know how to do many things, but I don't know what to do.
Exactly.
First. So it's going in and saying, so what seems to be the problem? And it's like you go to your doctor and you walk in the doctor's room and the doctor says, have a pill. Nice to see you too. What? is diagnosis without, is it's prescription without diagnosis, it's malpractice.
Exactly.
Malpractice, right? Okay. We could go on with this for a while, but I want to keep these reasonably short. If you had to pull out some sort of universal trait of a successful leader, regardless of context, you touched on a couple of points there. When you got a background in military, retail, global consultancy now, what are the universal traits of successful leaders? And how could somebody go about developing them? How do you build them?
So first of all, it's a relevant and valuable question. And that's also the reason why in the book, we start by saying there are some fundamentals. And that's about leadership authenticity. And what are the drivers of leadership authenticity? Well, that is that you build quality relationships with the people that you lead. And you do that by having a high enough interaction frequency, and then you do quality exchanges. So that means that you're really interested, really present, trying to pave the way and enable the people that you lead. Then at the same time, what's necessary is that you have a genuine interest in the people. And we don't have the same set of genuine interest in people. We need to find that in ourselves as leaders. And then we need to understand that leadership extends beyond the person-to-person relation. I need to look at what are the measurement points? What are the processes that we set up? How do we organize? Because that's a carrying wave. That's kind of the play field for the organization. Then I need to lead the people. And that also means that when you ask for universal traits, I could challenge you a bit on the traits part, because leadership is a discipline that can be learned. Are there some that have a better starting point? Yes, there are. But in different contexts, it's not the same starting point that gives you the strongest starting point. So very many leaders in the early career are valued because they're extroverts and good at communicating. But it's interesting to see that if you get into executives, it's more the analytical skill set that drives performance. So we need to understand also the levels is a part of the leadership context. We need to understand that in some industries, there's also this notion, a good leader can lead anything. No, you can't. Because in some industries, you need a certain level of functional insight. If you don't have that functional insight, you won't understand the patterns. You won't understand how this plays out. So there's a business acumen that, well, that's not a trait, but that limits so how far away can I move from the patterns and the pattern recognition that I know? But what we need to be aware of is that the patterns are not industry bound, they're context bound. Example, right now I'm working with an organization that has a lot of people working in trains, so they don't see those people very often. So, you lead them once in a while in a touch point, and they are all over the place all the time. That's the same for the leader who leads people on large construction sites all over a vast geography. There are denominators. So this is about workforce dispersion. Those are two very different industries, but some of the leadership practices are the same. So that means that if I'm not exercising the leadership practice that fits the context, I will be less effective. And back to the core of it, if I'm not authentic as a leader, so that I'm trustworthy in your eyes, if I'm not building that trust, then I don't build quality relationship, and the door to leadership influence is open from the inside. So that means that I need to build that rapport, that social capital with you. And over time, you will allow me that influence, which is basically at the essence of person-to-person leadership. Yeah?
It's I give you permission to do it. Yeah.
You need to open that door. I can take the handle, right, and open it up and then yell in the door. But if you close it again, you'll go away and you might pay lip service, but you're not really taking it on. And today, one of the key moves in leadership is that because of the external complexity, because of the competence levels of the workforce, we have seen a shift towards shared leadership. So go 30 years back, there was this assumption it was the leader that leads. Now the recognition is that leadership is a collaboration. It's a co-creation between the employees and the leader. and employees can take lead on different tasks. Yet we do need a leader, a vertical leader that holds the responsibility for orchestrating it. But the more I can empower and mobilize my people to take lead in the different areas, the more agile an organization I get. And the more dynamic the external context is, the more agility I need in the organization. So that's a move, contextual move in leadership from directing to sharing leadership. And if I come from, now we talked about the military before, the military has also recognized we need in some situations very directive leadership because it needs to be fast and now and I direct it. But on the other hand, you need very many units with a high amount of shared leadership where they take the decisions because they're in the battlefield, they see what's going on. So recognizing when is it that I move towards directing and when is I moving towards sharing, that's the other lever in contextual leadership. So we've got this open and closing balance that I talked about before. The other one is the directing, sharing. So that's more to the situational side you asked about before, Paul.
Excellent. We need to wrap this up, unfortunately, because I'm absolutely loving this. The book, why did you write it? Where can we find it? What's it all about?
So I wrote it because I was challenged by going into different contexts. So I wanted answers. I couldn't get them, so I had to find them. That's why I wrote it. And secondly, I think we need more contextual awareness in the world, and I want to contribute to that. So in the leadership arena. It's easy to find. The book is called The Contextual Leader. And if you then go to contextualleader.com, you'll find the book, you'll find me, you'll find some more resources on contextual leadership. You can download the first couple of chapters. When you use the book, when you buy the book, you also get a free trial of the leadership context inventory, which actually measures the leadership context. So if you want, a shortcut to say, what am I going to do about it? You fill in that survey and it spits out a 16-page report based on all the knowledge in the book, based on your specific answers saying, consider doing more of this, consider doing less of that, because that's the alignment you need in your organization.
Excellent. And all the links will be in the description below in this episode as well. One last question for you. If you had one message you could share with the world, 10,000 billboards, you could put them anywhere you like, what would the one message be?
So the one message would be that in leadership, it is not one size fits all. So forget about all the 5 steps to success and 7 steps and that will work. You need to go contextual, and then you need to simplify that and then, lead with simplicity. But there is no one size fits all in leadership.
We'll take that. Torben Noerby, author, captain, and chief executive. Thank you very much indeed for our conversation.
Thank you very much, Paul. It was a pleasure.